Hey there, good morning. It's morning where I am, 11:15. Hi, it's Celine, and today's Friday, the 24th, I believe, of September. And I have a lot of stuff that I want to talk about. We'll just see how this goes, right? I just want to put it all in there, put it all in the same vlog, because that does seem to reach a few people out there anyway who, find this entertaining or interesting in some way or other. I've tried changing my vlogging style slightly, where I try to not take as long to do things and to elaborate on things and so on, but I don't feel, at the moment, I don't feel like it makes much difference. It's just, we have a lot of astrological things that are slowing us down, I believe, at the moment. What with all sorts of planets going retrograde, there's a Mercury retrograde coming on fairly soon, I believe, end of the month somewhere. It seems like we are being given time to process everything that's happened to us or is is still happening to us, and it's just quite intense, really. So I'm here to share some of my personal intensities and what that is doing. So first of all, I really want to say that with my Tummo practice, I've talked about my Tummo practice on this channel a lot of times already. I should really make a small sort of an introducing Tummo kind of a video, that I can just link downstairs and or refer to somehow, where everything's in there, so you can have a go at that. As it is, I do have a lot of videos where I talk about Tummo and the way Tummo goes for me. So I will just refer you to my playlists about that stuff, okay, for the moment. Let me just say again, Tummo is a, let me have another sip of coffee because I'm, having bubbles. Tummo is a Kundalini Yoga practice, very specific, that I apparently needed to get involved in. And I'm having hot water as well with my coffee at the same time, more or less, because it's good for hydration, right? So, in parentheses. So, about the details of the Tummo process, I really refer you back to my other videos at the moment, because there's too much other stuff. What I'm interested in, I'm sort of using myself and my backstory and my make up as a person, my psychological MO and a background and all that, as a sort of a guinea pig to try Kundalini Yoga in this way on. So I'm using Shakti energy, Kundalini energy, in the Tummo manner, where it transforms inside the body in different levels and, proceeds and resets one's psychological and physical makeup. It is a really very strong healing practice. It's like a sort of a psychological reset in a way. How, even though it feels very powerful and it can be completely overwhelming at times, it does not really bulldoze one, at least not to me. There are times where I feel, okay, so this is going to be a bit much. I feel like I'm not comfortable with the level this is going at the moment. It just only takes like this much resistance from me for the whole practice to sort of simmer way down. So that is really one key benefit to this approach, with the Tummo approach, really, where the Shakti doesn't just run away with you. It doesn't just, the Kundalini doesn't just do whatever where actually you yourself don't always necessarily benefit from this energy in your person, right? I want to know what happens if I do this. How far can I go? Okay, how much can I benefit from this, considering where I come from, you know, my background and my historical background and all. How far can I take this? What can be the results? How can I live as best I can with this energy now in my life? Okay. So, and what does it mean? How does it change me? How does it affect me? What is happening? All that is really extremely interesting to me, of course, because I live in here. But I'm trying also, you know, on my channel each time to put this stuff into words to potentially, hopefully make it relatable in some way or other. So I should say that really I grew up with a situation. I'm 55 now in 2021, but I grew up, so, you know, that's half a century ago, with a lot of, I suppose, the main psychological problem I have had nearly all my life, and getting better over the past 5-6 years or so, getting a lot better, even before starting to do Tummo. My problem was a sort of a compartmentalization inside me emotionally. So I had traits that you might qualify as narcissistic, certainly. I had occasional moments of deep anxiety. Certainly there were situations in my life. There were situations in my life where, with certain people or in certain circumstances, where I was completely immobilized by fear. I was reduced to a pulp, really. I had no way of knowing what to identify with, really. I had all sorts of psychological issues, a lot of which wasn't really visible in everyday life. I suppose I managed to put on a brave face. A lot of the time I knew, I was aware of some of the issues that I, you know, had, or that I carried with me, that the history that I had in terms of what my parents had gone through, what their personal history was like, and so on and so forth. I was aware of the historical facts, okay? However, one very big missing element in my life was connection to other people in general, and or connection to my parents, to my other relatives. All of that was really blanketed out by fear a lot of the time. I was scared of connection itself. So if you're scared of connection, that will, or maybe I should just speak for myself here, as I sort of shirked away, withdrew away from connection a lot of times, I suppose I became very self-involved and very, you know, also very alone, and very in ways that weren't really natural to me, not to my person, not to who I really am or can be, right? So I've seen over the past couple of years, certainly since I've started sort of actively working on all this stuff, I've seen that there is like a person that I actually am with my background, and there's a person that I want to be, or that I can be, that I find really hard to describe. But I sort of have this belief that you have a positive personal nature inside you that can actually cope with everything. An emotional nature, a psychological creative nature, if you like. Something that is unfettered, something that isn't imprisoned, something that isn't boxed in by fear in particular, you know, in whatever many forms it actually takes. So fast forward to today. okay, to the past week. The thing is, I posted a video, I think it was on Monday, where I reported to you guys that I was able to manage to adopt a brick with my great-grandmother's name on it in the new Holocaust monument that they have built in Amsterdam. So that's not really next door to here. I actually have to plan traveling to Amsterdam because it'll take a whole day to get there. We will do that at some point, maybe in November. We will see what happens. Especially because I know it's going to be hugely emotional and I'm just going to be a puddle of misery, once I'm actually there with all the names, because I know I adopted my great-grandmother's name, but there's loads more, and there's also little kids, and it's pretty awful to be visiting. So after that, there will have to be some decent lunch and a break and some other happy shopping types of retail things, to be done, because otherwise you will just have to carry me home in a bucket. Okay? I'm a terribly emotional person. I tend to look, like I know what I'm saying, I think, more or less, most of the time. And it's all very controlled. I don't go kaboom into the camera because, yowzer, I find that scary and difficult. And, so. The thing is, I discovered at the same time, or maybe a day after I had actually done the payment and got the email, that confirming that I actually adopted this person whom I've never met in my life, okay? I discovered that a lot of the emotional upheaval didn't really connect to her personally, because I had never met her and don't know what she looked like. I don't even have a photograph or any of it, She died in Auschwitz in 1945, I believe, in early spring, as one of the last persons to be gassed in that of her family. A lot of her family members had already gone, including those small children and all that. And she was 74 at the time. I believe she had one older brother who was gassed even later than that, in just before the liberation, really. So it's all pretty terrible. But I have not, other than these, sheets of paper with names on the Yad Vashem website, where I can actually find more or less everybody, as long as I really know who's related to whom, by whom, and so on and so forth. So there's genealogy research involved in this whole branch of history for me as well. Other than that, I really have no knowledge. The reason this became a huge emotional, like a time bomb for me, is that it connects to my dad. And my father, I know rather little of. I have spoken to him a couple of times, also recently in 2019, and it has been rather difficult for both of us, I think, to try to connect. The bottom line of the whole thing is, I feel like the way I grew up, really, I cannot engage or have a permanent kind of a relationship with anybody that I'm related to, it seems, unless it is from the present day kind of a position. Like, for example, I have two other relatives on my mum's side that I have occasional, message exchanges with. Sorry. And that's just fine. We don't really speak physically or see each other or talk to each other on the phone all that much. But the exchange has a lot of value for both of us. And I appreciate that no end. Because I'm human, kind of, I still need some type of connection. What I don't need is identification. And it turns out that what with the emotional cloud sort of coming to me with respect to my father in the connection with his family line. He's related to this great-grandmother of mine that I adopted. He's related to this whole Jewish line. I came, it was actually on Wednesday, so a couple of days later, middle of this week, that I sort of had a couple of really potent realizations as to what happened when I was a small kid between my parents and me, okay? So this is going to be hopefully of interest if you yourself are a child of divorced parents. And especially if their divorce was painful, dramatic, and for you as one of the children or the child of that relationship, you are dealing or trying to deal with having these two sides inside you, okay, where there's massive antagonism between the two. So what I noticed, especially after, my emotional cloud has sort of started to develop and show patterns and things, was that I have always sort of tried to understand what was going on from their perspective, okay? And this is where it all becomes, the divorce thing in our lives tends to just, it's like a mindset kind of a thing that you were given as a child as a result of what happened to your parents, and for whatever reason all that happened to them, and whatever it was that they actually did, you as a kid you're not really all that involved, except that you have the mindset. And what I noticed certainly is that I tended to think in their terms, or what I understood of their terms, right? So it was always about them. It was really, to the extent that I could understand any of that, which was of course rather limited, it was what my mother, after, getting custody of me and taking me away and moving house several times and so on and so forth, what she used to talk about, that was what was given to me, and that was what I sort of had to accept in my life. So there was a whole pattern inside this emotional cloud. There was a pattern of it never being really about me. However, if I go into my emotions, I notice that there was one element that I was sorely missing as I grew up, and that was companionship. That's what I've called it in the past couple of days, the fact that your parents, either one of them or both of them, in this divorce kind of a situation at different times and in different modes, they engage with you and give you this companionship, this kind of a sense of feeling safe, feeling protected, and what you get from that is from the companionship. How I've named these things is I get a sense of permission to be myself, basically, up to a point, from the companionship, not even from the person necessarily, because when you're 4 years old, you don't understand who they are. You're not really engaged with who they are. You see what I mean? So I was left with the absence of my father's companionship with me when my parents divorced. My mother, I didn't have enough companionship with to start with, because of the way because of what she carried with her, because in both my parents' families there were concentration camps. On her side, it was in Indonesia, the Japanese concentration camps. So they were all traumatized. They were all severely messed up. They did the best they could. They really did. But that's the kind of thing that I've always been telling myself, in terms of the sort of, I'm not even participating. See what I mean? This is the dialogue, that's the mindset of the divorce thing that's constantly going on in how I look at myself, how I behave, what things I can deal with. I am just basically left out of the equation entirely, which was, I presume, their way of trying to protect me, whatever that meant. What I needed was companionship, theoretically, okay? because of the next part of this equation thing here for me, companionship, okay, leads to permission to be a certain way. Permission leads to identification. I developed in a certain way with my dad in those first couple of years, on this first couple of, I don't know, times I spent with him. There was a sense of a common vibration between us that I didn't have with my mother. With my mother, it was quite difficult and painful. There were other dangers involved with being with my dad, especially at a later age, or at least that's what my mother thought at the time. So she separated us. She had really lousy experiences with him. I don't blame her for doing that either. But it was always about them. See? So there's all these things going on. I identified very deep down, in a very hidden kind of a level of myself, the energy vibration, which is really just part of me. I identified it with my dad. A vibration that has to do with painting, with colors, with seeing colors around me, seeing auras even, and orbs and things. All sorts of wonderful types of experiences, emotional experiences even. All that was just shut down and sort of plastered into a little box and stuffed away where I couldn't see it. Because to identify actively with any of that in my mother's surroundings was somehow really dangerous. And she was somebody who just didn't forgive ever. So, yeah. So that's why it was really hard to connect with her. So you see that this is all really tough and difficult to live with. And what you do is, if you're me, is you just don't, most of the time, you don't want to engage with this stuff. And if it's been 30, 40, 50 years, you don't even know how to dig up that plastered down cube of emotional life, even though it's crucial to us. So if you practice Tummo, okay, back to the whole Tummo thing, I hope you're still with me. The vibration of your personal Shakti energy as it is transformed in the Dantians in your body, after a while, more and more, it wakes up the parts of you that were dormant. Okay? This is the greatest experience to be having. Even though it's quite emotional, it hurts for a while, or you may have to find a way to wrestle with it for a bit. I regained realizing my sort of a connection partially with my dad, but mostly with myself, that it was really me who responded to the situation with a certain attitude, a certain joy, a certain level of engagement, of participation in things. I was full on inside life at the time. That's what's been missing, because you cannot make yourself engage in life if it isn't in this way. That's your nature. See how this can be quite interesting. So the Tummo energy actually eventually sort of liberates this, and as you go through things, as I adopted my great-grandmother's name and all that, I sort of found the way in to this part of myself, this vibration of myself. And I did a card spread also. I used my Halloween tarot cards, which are, you know, all for the season. And I concocted a massive spread for myself using these cards. These are just basically regular tarot cards with a Halloween theme and lots of very cozy looking. I love this deck. This is the one type of image that it's just so connected, you know. It's got lots of cute hands and bits and things like so. I'm not going to show you them all because it's easy enough to find a a video where they show this properly. I'm also not going to go into my whole spread in detail. I'm just going to try to describe to you now what it is that I did in terms of asking questions and then deciding, you know, what it was that I really wanted to know in this context. So there's the past and there's the present. My spread had 21 card positions in the end, so that's why I'm not going to go into this in detail because you'll be here all day. I started off with wanting to have a card to describe the energy that I actually shared with my dad, whom I met for the last time. I suppose I was six years old. And I haven't seen in that last year that I was actually living with other people, I didn't see him that much. And there was a lot of tension and pressure on everybody at the time. And sort of I just wasn't part of the game, really. They were trying to keep me away from it all. And I sensed the tension, of course. But when you're 6 years old, you just can't make sense of all this stuff, right? So, the energy because I had unearthed this notion of this companionship and then of the permission and or the identification kinds of things. There's another element which because of how my dad goes about in his life in these kinds of things, I wanted to know to what extent there was a manipulation towards me going on, like a gaslighting, narcissistic kind of a behavior. I didn't feel like there was too much of that myself, but you don't interpret things in that way at that age, right? So the times that I am really referring to where I actually communicated with my dad was probably just a handful of times when I was actually 5 or so, when we all still lived together. And I just have a minuscule snippets of memory of that. And I know more or less a few things that were said and so on and so forth. But a lot of it, what I remember, is in the mindset kind of a pattern about them being about each other, you know? So it will, the elements I'm trying to unearth here are about how I felt, really. How do you get at how you really feel other than through tarot, you know? I tend to have this emotional, overwhelm with this kind of thing. There's lots of tears and I just have no idea how to deal with everything. It'll just become a huge mess. So I want to map it out. That's why I use my spread questions. So the only card I'm going to tell you about then, I think, is actually this shared energy with my dad. It was the Devil card, okay, in this tarot card. I'll try and find it for you as I continue talking about this. So all sorts of ways I can interpret that. It was certainly the way it looked from the outside compared to what it was that my mum was doing. And if I interpret it as what it was like at the time, in terms of energy, in terms of vibration, I suppose what my dad was communicating with me was the kind of a vibe that he also got from his mother. And they weren't all that involved in making any personal progress. Here's the Devil card. So it was about being, he gave me candy and things like that. Something my mother immediately, resisted and fought against. So it had to do, this Devil card has to do with being a slave to the material world, if you like. At risk for addiction, sugar addiction, certainly in my case, I believe that would be the case. And however, if you go down the line of my questions at some point, I wanted to know what my mother's energy in this whole configuration was at the time. And I got this one, the Ace of Cups. I will see how many cards I show. I don't want to bore you with the whole lengthy, because it was such an enormous series of questions, and there were a lot of positions where I actually used several cards and so on and so forth. The interesting thing about the spread, was that I asked for the energies, and because a lot of changes happened in my life after saying goodbye to those people, which I didn't even get a chance to do really, but after breaking off from those people just like that, there was I drew a set of cards for how active that energy, so the first position energy, for each of those questions, remained in my life after breaking off, after moving house to different places in different towns and so on. And in the third row of question positions, how that affected me, and or what the absence actually of the energy in my life, in my daily life, meant to me. So you get a whole package. I think it was 12 or 15 rows of 3 of the energy, the hidden often level of activity. I had quite a number of Scorpio positions in there, so Cups cards that had Venus in Scorpio or Sun in Scorpio, that kind of thing going on, so it's hidden and going under the surface, that kind of a deal. Really useful to be using astrology for this kind of thing. But I also often coupled back to the actual cards in this deck to just have a look at this card representing my mother. I can look at it in all sorts of different ways, right? The Devil card is really very busy and very active, and my life with my energy, sort of with my dad, was like this. We're always doing things. We're always going out and, spending money and having pancakes in places and seeing people and busy all over. With her, it was really empty, and there is like a mutual contradiction going on with my mother, where, as far as I was concerned, and certainly compared to this Devil card, life with her was empty. The cup was empty as far as I was concerned. That's what it felt like. Even as I'm saying this, there's another, like a little tiny nudge of a realization going on that was actually what was happening. It happened that way because, in fact, her cup was really very full. She just didn't have enough room for me. She didn't manage to empty her cup at least halfway or so to make room for sharing a cup with me. She tried. Oh boy, didn't she try. But it was too much. It was just very difficult for her. So what I'm also trying to hand here to you, is the idea of energies in your life as spread positions with regard to whichever person is of interest to you, or however the past determines who you are. What are those energies? What changed? Did anything really change at some point, maybe during puberty, or when you went to college or to university or to work? You know, when you're often in people's lives, especially when lives are complicated and emotional and difficult, there's big shifts and breaks and things going on. So you, at some point or other, you can look at this, you can apply this kind of a strategy to your own cards, you know, going like, okay, so these are the energies that I used to have. These are the levels of how long I carried that with me, how much, in what form did I carry that energy with me, with respect to this person or that person, or my grandparents or whoever it is, you know, the church even, you know, something like that, or an old work atmosphere or things like that. You can apply this in all sorts of ways. And then what does it mean for me to not have this interaction anymore? And I am realizing as I say this that I might do this with this whole same kind of an approach for my work atmosphere that I used to work in for quite a while, back when I was a sales representative, you know, in a former life, in an earlier century, in an earlier age of the world. It's what it feels like. So because it was about my parents, I shifted from my dad's business to my mum's business at some point. I drew a line underneath everything, and I wanted to have cards for the result of the investigation position, because you have to close off this kind of a deep delve into your past, you know. You have to just seal it all up and tie it up with a ribbon somehow, mentally, certainly. So I did a position for what's the result of the investigation. I did a position with 2 cards with what's going to help and support me now in this kind of all this kind of a thing. More like that. And the final thought card, which was really funny. I wanted to look up the third self-help set of questions at the bottom. After what helps and supports me now, I asked, how can I redefine myself? What are the best elements or cards to redefine myself? Okay, that was number 3. And the last one was the final thought. The final thought was the 2 of Wands in this deck. I'm going to look it up. There's another 2, which isn't the one I was meaning. I will just show these to you because it was just really funny. And, you know, you gotta have, sometimes you also have to have a sense of humor, but you cannot force yourself to think things are funny if you're hurting. Forget about that. You know, it's pointless to even try if you're, here it is. This was my final thought. So this means 2 things to me as well. Not only does it mean separating out the devil persona inside me, you know, that links to my dad, from the Ace of Cups, feeling really sorry for myself, type of a absence of my mother kind of a thing going on with these 2 and their divorce. Look at that. It's hysterical. It has to do everything for me, really, in the core of things. It means ending confusion, knowing what I'm on about, finally, you know. So also understanding myself. I must say the spread has really helped. I have written it all out twice, where first I just jotted down all my questions and the cards that came with them, and the astrology for each card and all the rest of it. And then I did a second write-up, a bit neater, with just keywords. There's a fly zooming around here. It's the countryside, you know. So keywords, basically just one or a few keywords for each position to really nail what it means to me, right? So if I go into this here, I just did this in my regular everyday journal this time because it was big and my spread notation kind of a thing is a bit smaller. So the devil card, I wrote down no progress, but in quotation marks. And I should have really written no change. So the devil card to me in this kind of a thing means actually a fixed set of circumstances that never changes. Family, you know, background. Also, powerlessness, really not having any power at all to change things, to, you know. And I'm reminded of my dad's personal horoscope, which I have sort of done a, you know, an attempt, an analysis of what happens if I give him a Capricorn ascendant add up in on his birthday, on his date of birth. You know, he gets an intercepted set of signs, which is completely material for another video right here. But that means that in his house placement, so the ascendant and the midheaven and all those things, you know, there's actually a sort of a crunching up happening, which does happen here in the Netherlands. I think it's happens twice a day or so, but only to a small extent. The further north you go in on the planet, and I presume obviously also the further south, after a while, what you get is a couple of times during your 24 hours, the house placements crunch up. If you go to Scandinavia, this becomes really very much a big deal, and you can actually have sets of signs that aren't activated by a house cusp, a house line. So you can have an ascendant, somebody can be a Scorpio ascendant, say, and the whole of the next sign, so that would be what, Sagittarius, right, can be completely swallowed up, and the other one opposite, so Gemini, can also be completely swallowed up in that first house. Just to give you an idea of what that looks like. Whatever planet is in those signs also gets swallowed up. I have a friend from Oslo who has this type of a situation going on in her chart. She has two huge houses. The ascendant and the second house are massively huge, and numbers 3, 4, 5, and 6, and whatever that is, you know, 12, 11, 10, and 9 on the other side, they're really tiny. And so you have two lines in each side. I will hold it right there with the astrology, okay? The thing is, north nodes, my dad's north nodes and south node, nodal axis, are in his intercepted signs. And what that really means in normal people language is that his, as far as he's concerned, there's no direction in life. This devil card is explained in this way. Is my mother had the same planetary positions to a large extent, which is one thing that just keeps drawing me back to astrology. They were born 2 days apart, those parents of mine. At the end in the last part of April in 1934, they were born. There was just 2 days between them, 1.5 days really. So even though she had the similar nodes, the same nodes, you know, the north node in Aquarius, for her that was actually something that she could access. For him, it didn't mean anything. The interception of the sign sort of, it obscures completely the content of that sign to whomever it may benefit. You know, I'm just saying. Am I 50 minutes in? Is it 43 or 48? I can't read. It looks like 43, 3/4 of an hour. Yeah. I had a great time with these cards, and it really works to have a deck. The more difficult the questions are, I've often used Marseille Tarot and similar to basically just get a very plain reading. You know, just the very plain basic content of particular positions. Are there 2s or 3s? What's going on? Are there aces? Are there majors? Are there court cards? That's it, really. And in this case, it was so helpful to just have these lovely, beautiful, orangey things going on, all the pumpkins and all the little puppets, and it's just Such a joy to work with. I love this deck. I really do. And what with my sort of reclaiming, which was what this all, it is all about, reclaiming your own nature, really, and releasing the identifications with either the devil or the Ace of Cups, either the good or the bad, all the pretense. It doesn't really have anything to do with me. It never really had anything to do with me. So it was a frame I was born in, and I can always try and think of why that is and whether there's reasons why this happened in this way. But the main idea for me really is, how can I eventually benefit? How can other people benefit? You know, my husband, his colleagues at work, my friends, my family, relatives, anybody, my neighbors, the people that I, come in contact with, will benefit if I am in alignment with myself. I've done a lot of alignment work, and this is also a result of that. It's another term, if it doesn't mean anything to you. Alignment is really all about finding out what it is that you really want, and you have to ask yourself. That's the only way to really figure that out. You cannot, well, it's what people get to, be suggested to the whole time, is if you go and buy this, that, or the other thing, or if you go shopping, if you go spend, I used to believe, I was a firm believer that if I just went out for dinner, if I went to a restaurant, that would solve all my inner travails. It doesn't. So having a lockdown was difficult. Oh yeah. I'm going to thank you for lasting this long. If you did, you're awesome. Because, oh boy, I feel a lot happier. There is one more element though, which I will talk about in a separate video, because I don't want to do more than 3/4 of an hour for you guys at a time. It's insane. But there's the inner lodge, the benefit of the inner lodge. Maybe it'll be worth actually going into in a different video. Okay, next week, maybe, Thank you for being here and for watching. I love you to pieces. See you next time. Ciao for now.